What is something a high school teacher told you that you will never forget? On 9/11, while classes were all but cancelled, most teachers just rolled in TVs and left the news on. Not Jim R. He got up and lectured. To the groans of students, he talked about the effects this would have on the economy, our politics, our culture and society, and he was right, in somewhat broad strokes, of course. But this was literally hours after the towers collapsed, when so much was still unknown, frightening and tragic. It really gave me what I would consider a solid base of understanding the things that would come in the next decade. He talked about how traveling would change with restrictive security measures, how politics would take advantage of terrorism, how the wars we will engage will be paid for by my generation, my kids' generation, and so on. He talked about how racism will spike toward Middle Eastern peoples out of anger and fear and how that is totally wrong. As a vet and former cop, he cautioned us to not join the military while emotions ran high and a sense of patriotism was thick in our veins. It was a gift. As the years went on, WMDs, the Iraq War, TSA, Department of Homeland Security all came about. I felt like I already knew. I will never forget that 4th period class. I had a gym teacher that was known for being strict rude. He actively would make kids cry on the regular. Anyway, after my dad passed away he was still super strict towards me, but one day after track practice he caught me in the hall and said, "Your dad would be so proud of you." It caught me so off guard, I actually cried. So he did live to his reputation of making kids cry. Good morning, I'm Mr. Taylor and I will be teaching grade 10 English this semester. First let me address what you're all wondering. Yes, this is a glass eye. I lost it playing darts. Darts to the eye will stick with me for life. My chemistry teacher told my mom that I would do so much better if I asked questions. I've found that this is true in all stages of life. Ask questions. A teacher of mine said he would write me a letter of recommendation, but it had been a week or so and he hadn't gotten back to me yet. I went in a third time to remind him and I started off with an apology, to which he corrected me, saying don't ever stop advocating for yourself. It's advice I haven't forgotten since. Don't stop advocating for yourself, but please leave me alone for 2 seconds. My partner had a high school teacher that would walk through the busy hallways at school shouting hot coffee while holding an empty mug. He just wanted people to get out of his way and it always worked. In high school I used to wear a trench coat and was one of the larger kids at the school. I had a French teacher who used to follow me down the halls because the crowds used to part for me and she could get around quicker following me because of it. Leave your verbal guns at the door. This was the HS football coach's first words teaching sex ed at my high school. He used the metaphor of the old American West where cowboys would leave their guns at the door when they entered a saloon to drink so nobody would get killed in a drunken outburst. He said we talk about a lot of topics that might make us feel uncomfortable and tempted to make a joke at someone else's expense to break the tension. He asked us to leave our verbal guns at the door so everyone could feel comfortable asking honest questions. This was back in the late 80s. He was way ahead of his time. My English teacher in grade 6 put A and lot on 2 separate pieces of paper and taped them to opposite walls on the classroom. Then she got a student to run from A to lot while yelling with them A gets to other side Luwat to teach us that they were separate and that a lot is incorrect. I have never forgotten and can still picture it as if it were yesterday. It's been 12 years. I struggled with this one too. Still find myself having to correct it in text more often than I'd like. My teacher told me not to give my girlfriend a fetal pig heart for Valentine's Day because she'd probably get a restraining order on me. Looking back, solid advice. WHT. My high school biology teacher, on the end of every quiz or exam, would put a giveaway point question. The question was always the same. Science is A. exciting, B. interesting, C. a challenge, D. all of the above. No matter which you marked you got the point. However, since this was on every exam, The saying was sandblasted into my long-term memory. This led to me always somehow muttering this whenever I was taking an exam in university, substituting the word science with whatever necessary. Then it led to me muttering it whenever I was dealing with something stressful. Now it has become a fallback whenever I run into a life roadblock and everything is simply designated A, exciting, B, interesting, C, a challenge, D, all of the above. It's simple, but it helps keep me from being too negative. I am saving this comment because I want my kids to have this mentality too. Maybe I'll make a poster. My high school baseball coach sociology teacher always used to say those who are prepared create their own luck before exams. This is a true life lesson. Luck favors the prepared. Coming up to our final year 12 exams, my maths teacher handed out an article on the most common things people said on their deathbed. She said no one wished they had worked longer hours, that they had spent more time at work than with their loved ones. If we didn't get the grades we wanted, that's okay, because there'll be a back doors to where we wanted to go. Failure is okay. It's only a minor setback. What's important is having a good balance between work, studies, family, friends, and our own hobbies, interests. Not as inspiring as the others, but I always found it funny how my teacher would say 90 degrees instead of sit up straight. They should have said Greek letter pi too. What a chump. That our town was a shithole and the best advice he could give us was to move out and live elsewhere. Decades later, he was correct. My grandfather told me the college in this town is excellent, unless you grew up here. Best history teacher I ever had was a substitute. Final day of his weeks-long run. I told him as much and asked him why he didn't do it full-time. He said he'd like to, but he doesn't coach any sports. All the coaches are history teachers because they can get away with spitting out names and dates and descriptions, and that counts. His style was more cause and effect, and while more engaging, it wasn't deemed necessary by the school board. I said you should move to a better area. He said no. He liked it here because it's where he grew up and where he'd die. He confided in me that he had a terminal disease. Died the next year. 2005, a teacher said intelligence of the future will not be defined by how well you know one skill, but instead how well you can find information and decipher what information is good and bad. One of my high school teachers said the same thing. A smart person doesn't always know the answer to the question, but he knows where to find it, or something along those lines. Our high school chemistry teacher said, remember, a warm test tube or Bunsen burner are no substitutes for a satisfying relationship. And at that age I would not have had any idea what he really meant. In 1974 I was taught that the planet Mercury had a tightly locked orbit around the sun. That one side of the planet faced the sun all the time. It's not true. Mercury's true orbit and rotational periods were worked out in 1965. TBF. Most high school textbooks are about 30 years behind, so he probably found out in 1995. In my childhood only one person ever tackled my mother about her abuse of me and my siblings. It was Parents' Day and my B of a mother, as usual, turned up to take the credit for my being top of the class again. At one point there was just me, my B of a mother, and Mrs. Soames, physics teacher, in the lab. Mrs. Soames quite calmly challenged her, saying, Mrs. XXXXX, why do you treat Tom's daughter the way you do? She's a good girl and doesn't deserve it. To my astonishment, my evil B of a mother was speechless. No one had ever confronted her before and she just didn't know where to put herself. It was easy for the other teachers and pupils to make snide, patronizing remarks about this cow to me. A 13-year-old girl isn't in a position to do anything about it, and I'm guessing they were trying to ease their consciences about the fact that they were too cowardly to intervene. But Mrs. Soames has been a role model for me ever since, and an unforgettable example of those people brave enough to tackle a bully in the presence of their victim. To have someone stand by you when you are vulnerable, and make their support for you clear, I can't tell you how that's changed my view of other people. I had an English teacher my freshman year of high school who was one of the rare adults that treated all of his students with respect while at the same time challenging us to do better. I distinctly remember him telling our class, "You are not as mature as you think you are, but you are more mature than your parents give you credit for." He also told us about an agreement rule he had with his own kids. He understood how hard it was for kids to do the right thing in the face of peer pressure, so he had told his kids that if they were ever in a situation, underage drinking, drugs, whatever, where they knew they shouldn't be, they could call, and using an previously agreed upon code word that was banal and unsuspicious, he would know he needed to go get them and be the bad guy. He would show up, Uncle Buck style, and get them out of wherever they were. This would allow them to save face with their friends, and there would be no consequences for being the situation in the first place. My favorite math teacher had a philosophy about us understanding how to get to formulas instead of memorizing them. Basically, if we memorized them, we were gonna remember them wrong and would never be the wiser because we thought we remembered it. My econ prof said the same thing, and it's the truth. Got to be able to apply that knowledge to graphs and real life examples. Whenever my teacher said anything controversial that he didn't want repeated, he would preface it with, "Don't quote me on this because I'll just deny it." I still use that. One of the coolest, more laid back teachers I had was straight up like, "If you try to snitch on me, I control your grades." Struggled with dyslexia and a learning disability my whole life. English class was heck for me every year. Senior year, my lit teacher read some short story that was required of me and said, "What the frick are you doing here? You are starting in my AP lit class starting tomorrow." I passed the AP test and my entire life really began because he believed in me. I'm now a high school teacher, and while not as great as him, really think I'm doing good work. I struggled in math so badly. Officially, I passed it, but the reality was that no matter how hard I tried, I could not do it. However, I was in AP English. Turns out, I have a form of dyslexia. Wish I had known that 40 years ago. My favorite history teacher told me follow the money, not in life as such, but in looking at events in history. It wasn't enough to say X country invaded Y country because they wanted more power. Why did they want those lands? What was going on in the economy that made it worth the resources to invade? In truth, it rarely comes down to ideals. You follow drugs, you get drug addicts and drug dealers, but you start to follow the money, and you don't know where the frick it's gonna take you. Class camp. We're out walking a trail to the next campsite, carrying our lives in our packs. I was not in great physical shape and was well back in the rear. So it's basically just me and one teacher to make sure no one fell too far back. We came to a part where a branch had fallen across the trail. Big enough to be an effort to move it, but not so large that it couldn't have been moved by any of the 30+ other students and teachers that had already walked around it. Without even thinking about it, I grabbed the branch and tossed it to the side of the path. The teacher said to me, 30 boys walked past that branch. It took one man to move it, and he made life easier for every person after him. It became a personal motto, of sorts. Make it easier for the people who come after you, although when you do a good job, the person who comes after you is usually also you. My freshman year history teacher told us first day of school about how he went to college with Bill Gates. Said he was one of the people that Bill asked to invest in his startup. He had declined, and here I am, teaching history class to high schoolers. My ancient HS math teacher, who was from Arkansas, had a good deal of Walmart stock from, I guess, knowing one of the Waltons around its founding. From what I heard, he's just been sitting on it this whole time. My mom had me when she was in high school. She had to take me to school with her in a stroller every day. I ended up attending the same school and most of her teachers still taught there and remembered me as a baby. Most had super fond memories of bringing me stuffed animals and crap for me to play with in their class. Except one, Mrs. Engelhardt. She straight up to my face said, "I remember you. Your mom was that W." Oh crap, what the heck. My music teacher when I spent a large length of time skipping school due to various reasons. She had phoned me after spending hours tracking a way to contact me because she was worried. "I'm not phoning to tell you off. I'm phoning to make sure you're okay. You don't have to go to the classes you don't like. Your exam is on Wed and I am phoning to let you know. No matter what, I know that you'd still be practicing because you're a bright student and I know you'll go far no matter what you choose to do." That is incredibly touching. What a great person. Sometimes you just need someone to believe in you until you can do it yourself. I had a friend that was in the same history class as me and she had a huge crush on the teacher. She was also salutatorian of our class and literally voted most likely to succeed. I graduated with barely a 3.0. She and I both had our history teacher sign our yearbooks, and in mine he wrote, "I'm going to miss our banter in class. You are a highly intelligent individual." In my friend's yearbook he wrote, "Keep on truckin'." I never felt particularly competitive with my friend, but that little bit of irony really changed the way I understood how people view intelligence. My favorite teacher in high school, Coach Brininger, once told me that he bought his niece front row tickets to see NSYNC. Apparently, for some reason or another, her mother could not go with her, so instead, he did. He then told me that midway through the concert one of the guys ended up with a hole in the crotch of their pants. This is a direct quote by him. I guess he didn't notice, or maybe he just didn't care. Either way, this dude was free balling, and from my vantage point, I could see it all. So there I am, sitting at a concert I didn't want to be at, with a starstruck 13-year-old, watching some dude's balls shaking above my head. Good times. He was an awesome teacher though, and never gave up on me. I really want to know which NSYNC singer was freeballing. One of my high school teachers asked me if I had ever considered pursuing astrophysics. I hadn't. I was asking a lot of questions and it was a really interesting topic to me. It was the first time a teacher ever saw anything in me and believed in me. Until the pandemic hit, I majored in physics with a minor in astronomy. When the pandemic started, our professors basically said go teach yourselves and ghosted us, and I was screwed. I truly believe if the pandemic hadn't happened that I'd still be pursuing that program. Unfortunately, I do not have the funds to do so. I'm now an education major. He told us about the time he and his son secured the only nearby village and started a slave trade on a family-oriented Minecraft server. Not how I thought that sentence was going to end, but I'm certainly glad it did. Young man, I said, no talking. If you have something to say, meet me out in the hallway and we'll discuss it like men. Another freshman history teacher filling in for my regular teacher after a new kid who had only been enrolled for 2 days, whispered, "Who is that?" to my neighbor. The man who invented the diamond. Alright, I got your attention now. H. Tracy Hall. Write this name down. Dr. Hall invented the first reproducible process for making synthetic diamonds. I mean, this is way back in the 50s. Now today, synthetic diamonds are used in oil drilling, electronics, multi-billion-dollar industries. Now at the time, Dr. Hall worked for General Electric and he made them a fortune. I mean, incalculable. You want to know how GE rewarded Dr. Hall? A $10 US savings bond. That's real nice, Mr. White. If you want to hurt a man, I mean really hurt a man, you don't hit him in the crotch, you hit him in the wallet. My 11th grade social studies teacher. I had a baseball coach for English sophomore year and we had to write a daily journal. One day our theme was writing about something we regretted. I wrote about how when I was younger, my mom had cancer and regretted not being there more for her. I didn't think he read these things and ended up writing, "You did nothing wrong and being young. You couldn't have known any better." He was a good man teacher. I did cross country in high school. I was not very good, but not the worst. Middle of the pack. Right before a race. Literally about to line up and get ready to run. I'm nervous as frick. I've been training hard every day after school for this. Our coach gave my team a pep talk. You know, in this life, some people have it, and some people don't. Good luck. Thanks, coach. I had a math teacher say he'd bet the farm that 2 of my classmates wouldn't graduate. They both did, and he's still a douche last I heard. Mrs. Botilho, my senior year English teacher, left me a note on my final essay. She said that every writing assignment, she would put mine on the bottom of the stack so that she knew she had a good one to look forward to. My high school gym teacher and soccer coach told me, "Get the frick out of this shithole town before you end up getting trapped like I did. Trust me, that girl is going to trap you. Definitely never forget that." I did get out, went away to school, stayed with the girl I was with through college until she cheated on me on my 21st birthday. After that I stayed away from my hometown for about 8 years, enjoyed my 20s. Now I'm engaged to a wonderful lady that actually went to my high school but didn't tell me she had a crush on me till late in my 20s. We now live in the town next to where we grew up. I was having a particularly bad year in high school emotionally and my grades were starting to reflect it. So my dad went in for parent-teacher conference day. When he got to my orchestra director, he bluntly told my dad that I was brilliant. When my dad just kind of shrugged it off, like okay yeah he's a smart kid I guess. The director looked him in the eye and said, "No, you don't understand," and proceeded to lecture to him about me. I heard this secondhand from my dad and then talked to my director about it afterwards. His words and his faith in me have stuck with me all my life. I'm now finishing up a PhD in mathematical physics. That freaking rules. I teach HS and I'm going to remember this for every parent-teacher conference I have for the rest of my career. Kids really are brilliant. That nobody really cares, and that's a good thing. He was a very interesting drama teacher, subbing for the regular teacher for her maternity leave. He was directing a play that he wrote that a few of us were in. In high school most people are terribly self-conscious and afraid of judgment. Be a good person, but go and make mistakes. Be silly, live your life, and own it. In the end most people won't remember if you looked stupid for 5 minutes. By teaching us that most things you do are trivial and inconsequential, he coaxed us out of our shells and got us to really act, but it left a big impression on me for my day-to-day life too. I was a senior and my boyfriend at the time was a junior. I had a part-time job at a restaurant and had formed a little crush on one of my co-workers who was a bit older than me. I knew it wasn't realistic, but I couldn't help the way I felt. I confided in my APUSH teacher from the previous year who knew both me and my boyfriend. He said to me, "Everything that happens up there in your mind palace is harmless. You can think and feel however you want, and as long as you don't act on those feelings you're not doing anything wrong." That really grounded me. My boyfriend and I had one of the happiest, fruitful, and stable relationships I've ever been a part of. Although we broke up when I left for college, we're still good friends. Shortly after this conversation, my work crush evolved into an amazing friendship and he started dating one of our co-workers who became one of my best friends. They're slightly older than me so I look up to them and joke that they're my parents. They're still the only 3 people I try and see every time I'm in my hometown. I had a teacher that said kind of the same thing. It's okay to think about pushing your spouse down the stairs, just don't push your spouse down the stairs. 11th grade AP US History. Anytime somebody in power tells you something with a smile, don't trust a dang thing they said. Whenever they say my fellow Americans they're about to try to get you to do something they'd never do. And there's no such thing as a short war, especially not for the people in it. Thanks, Mrs. Mellon, and frick cancer. Reminds me of a quote I saw: "If you trust your government explicitly, your history teacher didn't do their job." Sounds like Mrs. Mellon was a very good teacher. I have become aware that I meant implicitly not explicitly. English was my second language. My bad. You're just one of those people who'll always struggle with math no matter how much you study. Took that to heart, kept trying, and ended up pursuing mechanical engineering in university. Something a lot of people need to understand about math. Yes, there's some people who are just naturally good at it, like everything else. But it's a skill that can be learned. Enough time and practice and you can learn and understand any form of math. Gym teacher. Date marry someone who likes you more than you like them. Math teacher. I'm not saying you all have to go to Harvard. Life is about the tools you have. School just gives you another tool. Heck, drive a truck, but never stop learning. Baseball coach. Nerds have far more interesting lives than jocks. Trust me. First one is interesting and not for the faint of heart. Some people love falling in love. It only works if you want control, because the one who loves less controls the relationship, which is good if you have good reasons, but obviously can become sour, and that's how abusive relationships start. Our class was supposed to be reading 1984. One day I showed up to class and our teacher hit us with a pop quiz on the previous night's reading assignment. I had not done the reading so I was completely unprepared. I did my best to guess the answers on the first couple of questions, but after that, I knew it would be obvious that I didn't do the assignment, so I started writing my answers as observations about the book. My last answer was along the lines of, "This book is boring" or "This book is weird." When I got my quiz back, he had written, "How would you know? You haven't read it." I saw that and knew I was going to prove him wrong. That night I sat down and read the whole book with the intent of coming to class the next day and telling him why it was weird and boring. Instead, I liked the book and I came to class and told him what I would have done differently, the same as the main character. He challenged some of my thoughts and I had to do some introspection. I appreciated that he called me out and that he didn't dismiss me when I came back after reading the entire book. From then on, I always made sure I was prepared for assignments. It has paid off in my career when I have been challenged in my work. I have been able to point out why I came to the conclusions that I did and have earned the respect of many people in my company as a result. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.